Okay, so let's continue. So I want to add more thoughts to the things that I've said. So yeah, I've talked about plenty of things before and in the previous video and previous videos. So I'll add more thoughts to these concepts, okay? So the first thing I want to talk about is, like I talked about previously, with the concepts of maps and cities. And I want to add this. So let's talk about when I talked about large cities and these maps, okay? So I talked about these loops, these, I guess you could call it, I don't know, speed loops maybe, or these driving loops. And again, so to this I want to, I talked about various waterfronts and various other landscapes and the way various other terrain features and the way these can, from driving in these loops, can create interesting views of these features, these terrain features, these land features and waterfronts. So another thing I want to add to this is I want to talk a little bit about the infrastructure of these loops. So a concept that I want to add to this, and this is not necessarily for every single segment or every single part of these loops in certain parts and in certain loops. I want to talk about the concept of, and not just for the loops, but overall for the um, overall in the sense of infrastructure. I want to add the concept of verticality, okay? So vertical layers, vertical stacks. So with the loops, there can be a concept of vertical stacks in certain regions or in certain parts. So imagine, like I talked about, imagine, for example, in the context of a significantly large island, okay? And maybe there is a loop that goes all the way around the island. Now, this is not a circular island, not necessarily. It would have its own shape, so it would, go around it and in following the shape, not necessarily exactly the shape. There would be certain parts where it would be kind of following the outline. There would be certain parts where it would go more inward into the island, and again, move through this loop would make you move through in an interesting way. So in certain segments, in certain parts, vertical stacks can be imagined, okay? There are vertical streams of movement, vertical, like I said, so-called roads, and in a vertical sense. So maybe there is a certain segment where on one side you have that waterfront and an ocean, and another side you have a beautiful view of the city. And this could be a vertical layer, a vertical part of of this loop, and it would be at a certain height. So you would be, while driving on this segment of the loop, you would be much higher on, from the surface, from the surface of the island. So it would create for an interesting type of experience, because you would be so much higher. Kind of, in a sense, you could think that it would sort of be like flying, and I will get into that flying part after, as I carry on with this video, because there is, I will talk about, like I said, with various VTOLs and aeroplanes, and how that relates to this concept of vertical layers and vertical stacks. Okay, so this would be an interesting view. It would be an interesting experience in these type of segments of this loop. Okay, and to be that up high and going streaming through this region of the loop, like I said, there would be a concept of velocity and high speed. That would be interesting. And again, these vehicles can be imagined in very interesting original ways. I'm using the word vehicle loosely here, okay? So, and again, with other parts of the infrastructure, imagine, and with the loops, imagine various interchanges, these uh, eloquent and intricate interchanges, okay? They are intricate, they're elaborate, but they're not confusing, they're intuitive, okay? I would like to imagine it in that way. Imagine various various intersections, vertical stacked intersections, and I guess you could call it cross-throughs, okay? And again, with the loops, certain closed regions can also be imagined, something like tunnels. Not exactly a tunnel, but like I said, it's kind of trying to describe the concept in a way, so I'm just using that word, okay? So various segments, various regions of these infrastructure aspects can be imagined with these concepts of verticality, and again in various innovative ways of imagining infrastructure, okay? So that is something that I wanted to say. And okay, so let's get to, okay, so continuing on with verticality, let's get a little bit higher, okay? So imagine, so we've talked about vertical stacks in a more of a terrain type of context, okay? So let's go high and get to what I'm calling the sky layer, okay? So this is, in a sense, now we're up high, and we've talked about the aeroplanes, we've talked about the VTOLs, we've talked about the different types of aircraft, where certain, uh, I talked about certain unconventional type of aircraft as well. Okay, so this would be the sky layer. So there would be sky streams. So imagine, uh, here's how I would want you, here's how I will imagine this, okay? So there is the terrain layer, there are the vertical stacks layer, there are clusters in the large cities, okay? I'm imagining a night scene, okay? So the city is lit up, it's shimmering with light, okay? There are transparencies in, there's use of glass in skyscrapers. And again, there can be other styles of skyscrapers as well, okay? So that would be, again, there would be various heights and various clusters. So that is a certain vertical aspect, okay? And then again, with these loops, there can be certain segments and other regions of, these so-called roads, where there would be various vertical stacks, okay? And then we go up high and we get into the sky layer. Maybe there can be certain stacks here, certain type of aeroplanes and aircraft. They have certain streams of movement, they have certain vertical stacks here. So in a way, it's moving up. There is a vertical movement here. I think it's very interesting in the way, again, like I said before, I am seeing this, I'm imagining this in my head. I don't know how much, how well this would be perceived, but I have a very clear picture in my head of what I'm imagining here, okay? And I have a very distinct three-dimensional omni sort of colored view with various layers. So a layered view of what I'm imagining here, okay? So, and I think it's very interesting. It's truly a brilliant way of imagining cities and, yeah, city spaces and skylines and, yeah, these type of possibilities. Okay, so yeah, that is something that I wanted to add. And again, with verticality, this can also be thought of in certain unconventional and innovative kind of ways. And with, for example, the architecture of the city, with various buildings, using the word buildings loosely, there can be interesting, and with architecture and with infrastructure, there can be interesting possibilities that can happen with vertical stacks, okay? And with streams of movement and streams of transportation, the way these things can all start coming together, it can create a beautiful, intricate but intuitive, not confusing, intricate, layered sort of um, theater that can start forming. I don't know how else to describe it. I think it's a very beautiful way of imagining this, okay? So interesting, lots of interesting possibilities in architecture imagined in this way, okay? So that is one of the things that I wanted to talk about. And aside from the road networks, the road streams, there would also be rail networks. And so there would be stretches of rail networks throughout the map, connecting all the various places in the maps, various cities. small towns, various countrysides, and so on. So, and within cities, there would be rail networks, and then there would be connections between networks. So, with the rail networks, again, there is a possibility, lots of possibilities with the architecture of the train stations. So, lots of different ways and styles of architecture can be imagined, and lots of possibilities can be um, can be worked with the possibilities of these stations. And you know, with uh, talking about these kind of spaces, there's also lots of possibilities in architecture with airports and aerodromes. So there are these various networks of various streams of movement, and again, with these hubs, these nexuses, or these architectural, um, yeah, I guess you could say structures. There's lots of possibilities in the way that they can be imagined, and the way, like for example, the rail networks can be arranged, within cities and in connecting distant places within this map. So again, there are lots of possibilities with these kind of networks in the maps. So that is something that I wanted to add. And with the trains, like I talked about previously, there are various possibilities. I talked about those really fast, high-speed trains. Also, again, talked about other interpretations of trains, certain more classic interpretations. So again, these high-speed trains, and the way I talked about in the motif of, the glossy train motif. So these high-speed trains, the way they can be imagined in those beautiful aerodynamic topologies. So again, that would be a great addition to these maps, and that would add rapid movement between places on the maps. And again, these high-speed trains can be imagined in various areas and in various type of various networks in various places in the maps. So again, that would be an interesting addition. And again, with the high-speed and beyond supersonic VTOLs and aeroplanes and aviation streams and aviation layers and aviation vertical stacks, air movements and the aeroplane movements. Again, this would add another layer of movements to the maps. So yeah, that is again something that I wanted to add. And with all these modes of movement and mobility, imagine the possibilities and fun with exploration. Like I said, exploration is one of the great concepts. So the next thing I want to talk about is when I previously talked about the Archon Jacket. Okay, so I just want to talk a few more things about this Archon Jacket. Okay, so like I said, this is a black leather jacket, and I've worn this type. It's kind of similar, not exactly, but it would be a reference. So I've worn this before. So again, this would be a round type collar with that extrusion that buttons up the other side. The extrusion on the collar can either loop back through a metallic loop, and button on its own side, or it can button on the other side without a loop. I think I like the metal loop type better, and I think that is the one that I'm imagining here. Would be with the zip I talked about previously, with a rectangular patch on the left side with 45-degree diagonal strips in hot pink and royal blue. I talked about the two vertical borders, the two horizontal borders, which are vertically covering the vertically bordering this rectangle, and how they would be in gold. And something I want to add to this is there would be epaulette straps, okay, on the shoulders on both sides, and there would be in gold 5 stars. So these would be kind of 5 in the shape of a W, okay? And I picked 5 because the star would be a 5, it has 5 points. So 5 points and 5 stars in the shape of a W. So I think that kind of goes well, I guess. Okay, so that there would be 2 epaulet straps on this leather jacket. And again, certain elegant strips can also be around the shoulders in gold. Again, elegant strips. Again, that would add some amount of interesting detail to the jacket. Okay, so that is something that I wanted to add. And this can be paired in many ways. I think it's very good on its own, and I think it would go with a lot of other combinations. A way that I would imagine this is with a well-fitting V-neck t-shirt, and again this jacket would and then can be layered on top of this V-neck t-shirt, and again this can be paired with a blue jeans, slim fit jeans with which has certain amount of shine, and again it's well fitting, it's slim fit, so it would create for an interesting attire. Okay, and masculine brawny boot type shoes in black that are, you know, solid and that feel good. And something interesting can be done with I guess the right pocket, I guess, because the left pocket kind of has, above the left pocket is the rectangular yeah, the rectangular patch, I guess. So and yes, the zips on this would be again in gold color. And so on the right side, I think an interesting addition would be uh, a rose, a beautiful deep red to slightly pinkish red type of rose on the right pocket. And again, along with this rose, there can be an interesting satin uh, satin pocket square, something like that. Okay, so I think that would create for a very interesting attire. So that is something that I wanted to talk about. Okay, and here's an interesting addition. Okay, to this, maybe a gold olive wreath. Okay, made out of gold, and it forms like a crown. I think that would look, I don't know, that might create for like a beautiful uh, addition to this. Okay, so that is something that I um, wanted to quickly describe. Okay, so this would be a nice leather jacket again with the, imagine the patch, the rose, the pocket square, the epaulet straps, the 5 gold stars on the shoulders, and yeah, very the combination that I described, and yeah, potentially the olive wreath. Okay, I think this would truly be visually seen in how it visually appears. Okay, so that is something I wanted to talk about. Okay, so that is this point. Okay, so let's get to the next point. So this is, like I talked about with these maps and these cities and various characters that would be populated, that would populate these maps, okay, and these cities and settlements and clusters and so on, okay, and landscapes and so on. So there can be, with these characters, like I said, these characters would be based on archetypes, and I think there is lots of possibilities with archetypes. There are so many archetypes, and like I said, I have talked about some of them in the Pantheon. So again, there are so many more archetypes to talk about, and I'll potentially talk about them. Yeah, potentially talk about them in next videos. So again, with so many archetypes being present, and again, a way of imagining these archetypes is what I talked about in the arcs, with the various emotions, with the various concepts, various human concepts that I talked about in the arcs. That would be one of the ways. in which all these archetypes can be imagined. There can be combinations of these arcs. I talked about so many things. I talked about things like intelligence. I talked about things like creativity, and so many more things. I talked about things like empathy. I talked about things like yeah, there are so many things that I've talked about. I've talked about celebrations, and I've talked about things like intuition, and so many things. So these things can create combinations, and they can create these characters that are based on archetypes, okay, based on combinations of archetypes. And that would be just one way with the arcs. There are so many other ways of imagining archetypes, okay, and there are so many more concepts I have with archetypes. So I'll talk about them. And yeah, so these characters, there would be a huge array of characters. And these characters being based on archetypes, they would have very interesting interactions with other characters. This world would truly be beautiful with all these people. Okay, so that is something that I wanted to talk about. Okay, with the characters and with all these people. And like I said, these would be ideal human forms. Okay, they would be beautiful, and they would be intelligent. They would be gorgeous. They would be spectacular. Okay, these people. So again, it would be a very interesting way in which this whole world comes alive. It's a living, breathing, dynamic world that is alive with all the things that are happening in this world, with all these characters, with all the various things that are going on. I talked about, like, for example, the climatic patterns. I talked about, again, this world, these maps are living. There is movement. There are things going on. There are various weather patterns. There are various things going on in cities. There are so many of these archetypes, and these archetypes, they have their own lives. They have uh, their own things that they do. Their interactions, the way they socialize, and all these things really make this world. This world is alive with movement. So that is something that I wanted to quickly say. It's a very interesting world. So yeah, that is something that I wanted to say, something that I wanted to add to all the things that I've already said before. Again, I'll add more things. There are more things that I have to say. There are more additions that I have to add to all of these things. But I think so far I've talked about a lot of things, and this world is coming to life, and I love it so much. Okay, so yeah, so those are yeah. I I want to imagine this world full of movement and beauty and friendship and romance and gorgeousness and spectacular sights, and that make you feel alive, that make you feel amazing, that speak to you with aesthetics. So yeah, this world is coming to life. Okay, so yeah, I'll talk about more things, and let me know what you think. Let me know if there's anything. Yeah, let me know if let me know what you think, and what you found interesting, or any of your thoughts. Okay, so yeah, that's where I'm going to end this video. I'll add more things in the next videos. So yeah, that is where I'm going to end this video, and I'll see you in the next videos. Okay.